Hi, everybody.
Hey, Cheryl, how are you? Walter, you need to run a cloth over your camera lens or something. You got some serious glamour shots going.
Oh, yeah, he does.
I was doing that on purpose.
It's a greatly improved appearance.
Must be one of them. Oh.
You guys can all witness me cut my finger off of the hatchet.
Don't do that on TV. What's wrong with my camera?
Still pretty blurry.
Yeah.
Chris, I got to get your blue cooler back to you. I'll track you down tomorrow sometime.
Yeah, it's no big. That's just a Shiner cooler anyway, so.
All right.
Shiner and fish. When we go out deep sea fishing. So. Can you grab another piece? Right there.
All right.
That one. That one. Go down. Yeah. Yep.
Go back inside.
That's it, Chris. Turn your mic off.
Right.
Ah! I have a puppy knife.
Now, let's see,
Thank you.
I see Pam, I see Matt, and I don't see Beth. Is she joining us tonight?
As far as I know.
Yeah, I know Tim said he wouldn't make it.
Right. This is
Well, let's give her another minute and then we'll get
coming in
started. I see Cheryl's. Oh, there's Beth. Good. Excuse me. So Walter, while we're waiting for Beth to get online firmly, you have to share with us who's your makeup artist? Yeah, I mean, you look good on TV yesterday.
the one that used to do Bozo the Clown. I got him.
No, you look good. Now, if I remember, you had a different pair of glasses on, though. Do you have like ones that make you look extra special or something? Or
The ones I had on yesterday make me look smarter.
oh, can I borrow them?
Not so much. I didn't say they made me smarter. They make me look smarter.
Okay, I think we've got everybody that we're going to have as far as select board members. So as chair of the Northwood Board of Selectmen, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, and in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which is authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for the electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during the meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate by clicking on the following website address and then clicking on the meeting notice under the calendar section of the homepage. So the web addresses are our standard Northwood web address. B, we are providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using Zoom, and instructions are provided on the town's website. And again, that's www.northwoodnewhampshire.org. We're providing a mechanism for the public to alert the body if during the meeting, if there are problems with access. If anybody has problems, please call 603-340-5711 or email Paul Allard at pallard, P-A-L-L-A-R-D, at town.northwood.nh.us. And D, we are adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access this meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. We'll start with the roll call for attendance. Matt.
Present.
Beth. Did we lose Beth? I think we did. So Beth is not with us currently. We still have a quorum, so we're going to continue. Pam?
Present.
And Hal Kreider. I'd like everybody to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, yeah, let's do the pledge first, then we'll go on. I pledge allegiance Thank you. One thing I should mention that I did not read off, and I apologize. We did the roll call, and I should have asked each member when they state they are present to please indicate if there was anybody else in the room with them during this meeting. That's required by right to know. So I'll just start off by saying my wife Irene is also in the room with me. Does anybody else need to make a declaration to that case or to that provision? Okay. If not, then we're going to move on. I see Betsy's online. Betsy, raise your hand if you would like to speak for the Citizens Forum. And if, Paul, you just double check and see if anybody's calling in to speak via phone or anything like that. We'll give you a minute for that. Okay, it was a short minute. I guess we're going to move right on to ongoing business. So we want to approve, I'm looking to approve the minutes from February 23rd. First off, does anybody have any comments or edits before we get into the discussion?
I have one small fix.
Okay.
Page 3, line 13.
Page 3, line 13.
Just amend Whitney Young to Winnie Young, W-I-N-N-I.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, very good. Anybody else have any edits? I have to say, Paul's doing a pretty good job. He's getting all the details without a lot of the fluff. So that's pretty good. Thank you, Paul. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes with that amendment that Matt suggested?
So moved.
And second by Pam. Thank you. Any discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Matt?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
And Hal is yes. So that passes. Thank you for that. We'll now move on to the consent agenda. And again, I'll just remind folks, the items on the consent agenda have generally been reviewed and approved by the board prior to this meeting. That gives us a better chance to ask for details and scrutinize them without any pressure. We can take our time doing it. So really what we're doing here is just approving it so that you know we have formally approved it and that you hear the monies that we are spending on the town's behalf. So Walter, would you like to work your way through that, please?
Absolutely. Good evening. So the consent agenda for March 9th, 2021 includes an accounts payable manifest dated March 3rd, 2021. It's batch number 15416 for $586,760.93. That includes a significant payment to the school district.
Right.
Payroll manifest dated March 10, 2021, batch number 16443 for $72,723.61. And a purchase order to Premier Park and Play LLC for $86,748.
Okay, any questions or comments on the consent agenda? And I just, yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Just a quick one. The PO for Premier Park and Play
Thank you.
is a PO that'll allow us to order the playground equipment for spring installation. 100% of that will be reimbursed through the Land Water Conservation Fund grant that we were awarded last year.
Yeah, that was a good move. Thank you very much for your work on that, and thank the rec department or rec commission for that also. I mean, that's a good flow of funds into the town. So Very good.
Free's always good.
Yeah, it's terrific. So any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read? I have by Pam and Matt. Would you like to second? Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Pam, how do you vote?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And Hal is yes. Okay, thank you for that. At this point, we're going to move on to the first reading of the capital asset policy and administrative rules. This looks like a lot of fun. Walter, walk us through the process and the procedure so folks have a context of what we're trying to do here and what we're going to try to accomplish at this meeting. Would you do that, please?
Sure. So typically the first reading is the introduction of the policy, and it gives the board an opportunity to comment on the first blush, gives the public comment to hear what the discussion is. We'll post this up on the website for public review with any amendments that the board might want to make tonight. And then we'll bring it up again at a future meeting, more than likely the next meeting, incorporate any public comment, and then either finalize or continue to work on the policy. This particular policy and all the policies that we plan to bring forward in the future has two components, and hopefully the board is on board and agreeable to this format. But the policy itself is the general guidelines and the general outline of what's trying to be laid out in terms of the policy piece is concerned. The administrative rules are basically the functional parts, kind of the nuts and bolts, how it works mechanically, internally within the office and so forth. Typically, the policy is adopted by the board and the administrative rules are adopted by the board and then amended by the town administrator as need be. So it doesn't have to keep going back and forth. If we find out that we have to change the path of approval on something, or we have to make an adjustment in one of the values, that can be done in-house, so to speak, and not have to go back to the selectmen. If the policy itself needs to change, then that goes back to the select board. So that has been a successful format in my experience in the past, and hopefully the board would agree that that makes sense going forward. And as far as this particular policy is concerned, this is Cheryl put this together, obviously, because it's a finance policy, and she'll give you a general overview and answer any questions or whatever if you're ready to go.
So Walter, I just want to ask very bluntly, Cheryl can give us the overview and talk to some of the specifics. Do we actually need to read the whole darn thing?
No.
Okay. I mean, I've read it, but do we need to read it into the record?
No, again, because we will post it.
Okay,
And
good.
the reading is basically the introduction. It's kind of a functional governmental term, but doesn't mean you have to read the entire thing into the minutes.
Okay, good, good. Well, Cheryl, do you want to get us started? And then I guess the question would be for you. Do you want to go through everything you want to say and then have us ask questions, or do you want us to ask questions as different things come up that we think of?
I can do it either way. It makes no difference to me.
Okay, so if we really get excited about one point, we can, okay.
You can interrupt, absolutely.
Okay, I'm just gonna, I might not be following your facial expressions as carefully because I'm gonna flip over to the document itself.
Okay. Well, before I started with the document, I wanted to just kind of give a little overview for everybody about why it's important to have these financial policies in place. Financial policies for governments play an important role in helping to outline the overall financial strength of an organization. And if you do not have relevant policies and procedures in place as far as financials, you increase the risk of errors, potential fraud, and non-compliance with state and federal requirements for things such as grants and whatnot. So it's just always a good idea to have these financial policies in place. And in our case here in Northwood, prior audit reports have commented repeatedly about a lack of significant policies being in place. So we want to address that. They also create stability and continuity in processes, because as Northwood knows, when there is any kind of turnover, somebody leaves, if you don't have a documented process in place, things can fall through the cracks. And so having these policies in place helps to prevent that as well. And it increases transparency of operations, which the public always wants to see. You know, if it's clearer for them what's going on, they feel more comfortable with that. So that's always good. The other thing to remember is that these policies, once they're adopted, we're not going to just shove them on a shelf somewhere and forget about them. They have to be reviewed periodically to make sure that they are still relevant and still trying to reach the goals that we're trying to achieve. So it's not cast in stone, but will be periodically reviewed to make sure they're still heading us the way we want to head, basically. So that brings me to the first policy we're looking at, and that is capital assets. And the reason I started with this one is that according to the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASP, their statement number 34 requires that governmental entities account for depreciation of their capital assets. And in order to do that, we have to obviously keep track of them. So there was no policy in Northwood that I could find in place at the moment. So I kind of started from scratch. And the other reason I went with this one is that it was the #1 recommended policy of the auditors. So here we are. So obviously, like you said, Hal, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the policy is outlining what we need to list in our asset inventory, and whether it's depreciable or not, and a table, if you will, of common useful life terms for various pieces of equipment to use in depreciation. I'm not sure if anybody wants to jump in, or I should just kind of walk through. We have a section of various definitions in case people don't recognize a phrase or whatever. Pam has her hand up.
Go ahead, Pam. I'll tell you what,
I
Cheryl, I'll let you run the meeting
do.
from this point, so you recognize the people as they want to talk.
Okay.
Sorry, Pam.
Me? Cheryl, it would be helpful if you're discussing section 1, 2, or 5, if you just would say that, and I would be able to go right to that section. So just let me know what section you're on.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll start with the purpose, which is section 1 is the purpose, and that purpose is basically to have a plan for documenting all this information that we need to keep track of. And section 2 is the objectives, and we want to have these financial statements in proper format that is required under the GASB 34, and what the policy could be known as, and I've kind of named it the Town of Northwood Capital Asset Policy until somebody tells me they want to call it something else. Section 3 is the definitions, the various terms that you might see throughout the policy and what they mean. That's a fairly long section. Section 4 just outlines the authority that the Board of Selectmen have under RSAs to create and implement these type of policies. Section 5 is just a kind of a general overview that any capital assets that are valued at $5,000 or more are needing to be on the inventory list and depreciated. And that runs right along with the federal guidelines that any federal monies of $5,000 or more for a asset needs to be depreciated and counted on the asset list. So in order to make it simple, I just went with $5,000 value for anything.
So Cheryl, related to that is, what about the useful life? Is there a upper or lower limit on the useful life?
There is, and I will get to that. I have a page that will go through the useful life thing in just a moment. Section 6 goes over the different categories of assets, whether they're purchased, they're donated, whether it's land, which is handled a little differently, and infrastructure for the town. They're all handled a little bit differently, and so they're categorized differently. And section 7 is the classifications of land and land improvements in the different categories and what they would include. As far as land improvements, it clearly defines that it's things like drainage systems, driveways, parking lots, anything that would have to go with making the land ready for a building or whatever use the land is going to have in the future. And sections 8, 9, and 10 are just basically explaining that we would be using a straight line depreciation method, which just means that we are going to assume that every year the depreciation rate is the same for the asset.
So Cheryl, that was one of the questions I had, because some of the equipment, you know, it seems to have a much quicker depreciation, even, you know, if it lasts ultimately 5 years, you know, like a vehicle or something like that. Is there any consideration to accelerated depreciation, or is straight line the standard?
Well, straight line is the standard. That's what I have put in the draft here, but I'm certainly open to discussion to if things want to be handled differently. I mean, that's why we're here, to look at it and talk about it. I personally find straight line is a lot clearer, and people understand it a little easier. And you can always adjust the useful life of items. And when we get to that portion, I will talk more about that.
I see what you're saying.
Because they're not set in stone. That is also designed by the policy and what we want to consider as a useful life for a particular item.
Okay, so maybe keep it simple on that end and adjust if we need to, rather than trying to get it too fancy.
Right, and to speak to Walter's point about the difference between the policy and the administrative rules, the policy outlines what we're going to do, but when we look at the administrative rules document, that's where it really gets into the nitty gritty, so that if we decide we want to change the useful life of a dump truck, we don't have to come back to the Board of Selectmen and have them re-adopt a whole nother policy. It can be amended by the town administrator as we need fit, you know, it's not restarting the whole process over again.
Okay.
So if we look at the administrative rules, the section 2 shows the classification of assets and the various kinds of assets and whether they need to be inventoried, whether they need to be capitalized or depreciated. And there's just a little graph so everybody can look and see if it's a building, then we need to have all buildings on our inventory. So it's a kind of a quick guide to see what are we doing with this particular type of asset. There's a little section 3 about how depreciation is going to be calculated. Like if there's a new asset that's purchased throughout the year, we take the half the value in the first year as the depreciation, regardless of what time of year it was added. Just again, to kind of keep it simple as far as record keeping and whatnot. And under section 3.5 is the table of useful life that we were talking about, and the different categories and classifications. And I've put some useful life numbers in there that I've gathered from various other documents, but this is the point where, you know, if as a town we feel we want to go a little longer on one thing or shorter on one thing, we can do that here.
Some of those look pretty long. I mean,
they could easily be changed, and I truly got them from other documents that I've picked up from other towns, and you know, every town is so different about detailing things, so we can work on those.
Walter?
I just wanted to add that you know, every year this is updated for the auditors and so forth, and that's the time when we can look at, you know, the specific equipment, and it's trending on schedule. If we think we might be able to get more years out of it because of you know, a light snow year or something like that, we can make those adjustments as we go along. So
Okay.
to Cheryl's point, this makes it just a template, just a guideline, and each year we can look at it and make adjustments if needed.
Got it. Thank you. Matt?
So my question is, in terms of trying to have an accurate accounting of all of our assets, I know that land doesn't depreciate, but are there towns that take into consideration appreciation of land value for an accurate accounting? Because I'm sure what a land value was worth on what town hall sits on when town hall was built is not what that lot's worth now. Is that something that we should be taking into consideration?
No, every place that I've ever been, it's, and the auditors have told me this from several different auditing firms, for land, it's the value that, the cost that you had put into it. So the land that the town hall is sitting on is going to be valued at very little. But no, we don't take into consideration any
I
appreciation
believe it
for
was
that.
6 bags of grain is what we paid for that. So that's perfect.
And again, this is you're depreciating an asset, and of course down to an unuseful life, and certainly land would never depreciate down to an unuseful life. So it's treated differently, because it's always going to be there. Market value is different versus the capital asset value. So that's why we don't trend that, because we'd have to go out and appraise them every year and that type of thing, which again doesn't necessarily benefit us in terms of our net valuations for assets.
Makes sense to me.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, section 4 just shows a couple of examples of how a common piece of equipment may be depreciated throughout the course of its life, useful life. The first example is a copier that was purchased and was the first year showing half the year's depreciation level because of it's a new asset. And then by the end of the 7th year, the depreciation has been expensed and it just sits on the inventory list until it's replaced or given away or whatever. And the second example shows when an asset is disposed of prior to it being all expensed and what that does for the financial statements. So just a little guide to follow through some of those, helps me to see. I love things on guides and graphs, and it makes it a little easier to follow, I think. So in order to accomplish this, we are going to have make sure that we have a capital asset list that Greg Colby was working on, and it's updated through 2020. But we will need to go through and verify information, double check that we still have things that are on that, and if anything's missing, and update it and that type of thing. So if anyone has questions that I haven't covered, then let me know. Hal?
So I guess maybe it's a question for you and Walter. Having been in this business for a good part of my career, one of the difficulties we used to have was getting folks to even fill out the initial form when they did the purchase. Do you have any idea how you're going to encourage that?
I guess if we were a big corporation, I'd be a little more challenged by that, but I think it's going to be, fairly easy. Obviously, having someone like Cheryl who's going to see the expenses that come through, as they're acquired, I'm sure she's going to, create a spreadsheet that's going to track those during the course of the year, so that, at the time, it's audit time, we can update the list and make those changes from year to year. So, again, I think it'll be fairly easy. Obviously, if she has that list created, she understands what assets have to be depreciated. I'm not too worried about it. I don't know about you, Cheryl, but
I'm not worried about it at all. The policy did have a form attached that I'm proposing that the department has used when they change any capital asset purchasing, removing, transfer, whatever. And that's worked well in the past in other places I've been. And basically, like Walter said, there isn't going to be any expense that goes through that I don't see. So I'm going to know who I need paperwork from. And in the past, I've just called up department heads and said, hey, come by my office, sit them down, and here's the form and fill it out. So
Yeah. I
that's
don't think
kind of
you'd
the
be
way I'm
shy
gonna-
about that, huh? Okay. Any other questions for Cheryl or Walter on this? I'd just like to say thank you for doing this. It was long in coming. So thank you for expediting that. I know you're just,
You're welcome.
months on the job, or weeks on the job. So thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
Walter, I think your approach is real good. Separate out the two items or components so that we aren't needlessly going back into BOS sessions to try to make minor adjustments.
From my experience, that's worked well. And
Yeah.
again, it doesn't change the purpose or the functions. It's just mainly the mechanics. If we need to do tweaks as we go along, we can make those, obviously, without having to put it on the agenda or amend the policy, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay, so just to wrap up then, this will get posted, and then how long will we wait before we have it back on the agenda and ask for public comments?
So we'll get it posted, tomorrow. It'll be posted for probably to the first meeting in April, and then we'll get any comments put into the record. If there's any amendments that need to be made at that point in time, we'll make them an adopted policy at that point.
Okay, sounds good. Good. Anything else you'd like to mention on this, Cheryl?
No, I think we covered pretty well for the first night.
Great. Thank you again for all your effort on that. Very
You're
good.
welcome.
Okay, I guess, Walter, we're moving on to your reports and anything that you need us to take action on for you.
Okay, I just have a few things, and let's see how we're doing here. Should be in good shape. Just a reminder, we do have a public hearing at 7, but we should be fine. Should be able to get through this without any trouble. So just an update for on the staffing, the building inspector, health and code compliance officer, and the recreation director position, both have been posted. We've started to schedule interviews with a couple of the applicants for the inspector position. And we'll obviously look at the additional applications and so forth that we might receive going forward and schedule those as soon as they come in, basically, at this point. So we have our surplus vehicle sales. It's still ongoing for a few more days for those of you that are looking for new vehicles. Air quotes. The former cruiser, the 2007 Highway 1-ton truck has been added to the posting. And as I mentioned, March 15th is the deadline for submitting sealed bids. So far, I did receive one bid for the police cruiser. So hopefully we'll get additional bids coming in on that vehicle. And also we have the command vehicle for the former command vehicle of the fire department is also on the list and out to bid as well for the March 15th deadline. As far as the other 1-ton that was damaged by the tree during the winter, Primex did provide us an insurance claim. They didn't total it. Obviously, it makes no sense to put that kind of money into the vehicle. So that would be another vehicle that we'll put up for sale, obviously, and just retain the insurance money to kind of offset whatever loss we may take on the sale of the truck and what's left of it. So,
right.
So that's in process at this point. An issue regarding Article 14 on the 2021 warrant. It's been brought to our attention by Ms. Joanne Bailey that the original purpose of the Bicentennial Committee Trust Fund was not specifically for funding the bicentennial event, and is actually a perpetual fund to benefit the town parade properties and town hall. Betsy Coburn was nice enough to provide documentation as the chair of the trustees, the trust funds, to confirm that Mrs. Bailey was correct, that the original intent has not been satisfied, and that it was set up so that the principal in the trust would be preserved and only the interest would be expended. So therefore, that's a perpetual fund that will live on for that benefit for years to come. So regarding the article that we have on the warrant right now, certainly that's one that is not appropriate to dissolve that fund. So that would be passed over at the deliberative session, so it doesn't go on the ballot. As far as the intent of taking the money that was in that account and using it to fund the 250th existing trust fund, that again was going to be coming out of the fund balance, because we were going to put the 250 the bicentennial funds into the trust fund, into the fund balance, but we can still go ahead and fund that out of the fund balance. We have sufficient fund balance to do that. So, so I provided in your packet the backup information that Betsy provided, and I think it's quite clear and conclusive that that fund cannot be done away with.
Pam?
Yeah, Walter, you said the 250th fund will still need a different funding source, but it can go ahead because the funding would come from where?
General fund.
Well, the fund balance, the article is written so that, if you remember, we were going to take the money just because of the mechanics. It would have to go out of the bicentennial fund into the fund balance, and then appropriate it out of the fund balance into the 250 committee fund. We can still appropriate and fund the $8,400 out of the fund balance. It's just not going to be offset by the fund, the money that was coming out of the bicentennial fund. So they'll still get the appropriation if approved,
It would be.
and it won't make a difference.
So that warrant article without bicentennial fund would require a, what, $8,400 funding from the general fund, which
Yes.
would be a separate expenditure. Does it simply state the creation of a 255th committee fund? I'm trying to remember if the warrant article specified the
adds to.
8,400.
Adds to.
The fund
It
is
was created last, it was already created.
The fund's already created, so
Yeah.
as of right now, the fund has no funding,
There's some,
but the
a little.
warrant article would give it 8,400.
It would add 8,400. There
Right.
is already some money in there.
Okay, from general fund as opposed to the bicentennial fund.
Right,
So, okay, all right.
right.
I'm
And
just wondering if that'll be talked about.
yes, well, it will be talked about actually later in this meeting when we talk about Walter's long-term plan for how we manage that general fund. It has not been managed purposely for years. And I'll just say it, you know, it's been on my radar for at least a couple years, if not more. And when I heard Walter say that he's done this a couple times for other towns where he's, you know, done the analysis and looked at how you smooth out the use of the general fund, this was one of the things that I really pushed on. So Walter, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, just want to make sure that you're very careful with the terms that you use relative to the general fund and the fund balance.
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
Um, the general fund indicates, you know, an appropriation out of the budget.
Right, yeah,
The fund balances are, for lack of a common term, are retained earnings.
Yeah.
So something, you know, something coming out of the general fund would have to have an appropriation and would have a tax impact. Out of the fund balance, there's no tax impact because we already have appropriated that money. So I just want to, I got a feeling that's what Cheryl was thinking, the same thing.
yeah, okay, you know, that's a good point, yeah. Certainly, I tend to think I'm similar because you just, the money that's left over from one year rolls into that, but you're right, we need to be careful.
The generating, yeah, the general fund is our operating fund.
Right,
Our
fund balance.
fund balance is our retained earnings. For lack
So
of-
Walter's going to be talking about using the fund balance, my correction, sorry.
No
So
problem.
the term is retained earnings.
No,
That's
Fund
the fund balance.
Fund balance.
Yes.
Retained. I'm just going to put it in quotes. So
Yeah,
so I have a clarity on that. Because I did, forgive me, I did think it sounded odd as far as general fund.
yeah, that's my error.
Okay, thank you.
so anyway, that's the status of that particular article. And as I said, we'll address that at the deliberative session, and we'll still be able to continue with the funding for the 250th, so that won't skip a beat. And the bicentennial fund will continue to exist and provide benefit to the town parade in the future for whatever the board feels is in compliance with the trust agreement.
Go ahead, Matt.
So Walter, do you need a motion to move that sum out of the unexpended fund balance into the 250th fund?
No, because it's going to be addressed in the warrant article
Okay.
on the ballot, because that's the way we set it up already.
Okay.
No
All right,
need.
so we'll just do it through the warrant article. Sorry,
Yes.
that makes sense.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh.
Any questions?
Yes, just one other point on this. The good news out of all this is it looks like the expendable part of this fund can be used for some of the sprucing up that Beth is doing in the Great Hall. So that's actually interesting. We uncovered that, but I guess, Walter, you can talk to Beth about what we can and cannot spend it on, but it looks like it's promising to me.
Yeah, I think, you know, reading the definitions, I think it's pretty clear about, you know, things that can be used for. It speaks of landscaping, you know, things outside the buildings. It talks about yearly repairs and maintenance of the flagpole. It talks about, you know, any maintenance and repairs of furniture and fixtures within the present town hall or any future town hall. So I think it's fairly broad to the fact that it can help us, you know, with the sprucing up piece as a funding source.
And are we agents to expend on that?
Oh, good question.
I think under the way that the trust is established, that it does authorize the selectmen to use those funds and for them to administer the funds for those specific purposes.
Good. Thank you, Walter. You want to move on to your other items or?
Yes.
Yeah, we got time yet.
Yep. So it's that time of year, as you probably noticed, frost heaves are abundant, and Chris is requesting that the board authorize the posting of all town roads at a maximum vehicle weight of 6 tons, effective actually midnight tonight or 12:01 tomorrow until lifted.
Do you need a motion for that or just general consensus?
A motion would be good, thank you.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to authorize Chris Brown to post all town roads to a maximum vehicle weight of 6 tons effective March 10th until lifted.
Great. You know, I'm getting a little bit of echoing. Is that my
Yeah.
computer?
Not
Okay.
sure.
All of us.
Any discussion on that motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Beth? Oh, you have to say it, Beth, because,
She can't speak. She's having issues.
okay. Oh, she is. Okay, so we'll just do hand. Okay. I'm going to verbally say that Beth waved her hand yes. Just so there's no question. We've been trying to make everything verbal. So Beth is yes. Pam,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
and Hal is yes. Okay, so Chris, you're all set to post. Walter?
Did you want to add anything to that, Chris?
No, pretty much covers everything. Good.
Gives you the authority to be the bad guy.
Some of the roads
I've
are
already
getting
had-
pretty soft.
I've already
Let's do
filtered.
it.
Probably 30 or 40 various calls from,
Yeah,
you know, facilities that are looking for permits, but
yeah.
we'll make do.
Yeah, I think that is important just to note that, you know, Chris does have some discretion, you know, depending on the weather, temperatures. We do have a permit, temporary permit and so forth.
Hmm.
So if for some reason you happen to see, you know, and there are exceptions, things like fuel trucks and that type of thing are allowed to travel on the roads. So just if you happen to see one, you know, more than likely, or hopefully they've had permission granted by Chris, or they're exempt under their, the guidelines of the statute.
Good,
So
good.
otherwise, bust them. No, just kidding.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the tanker. Let's see if we can get through all these.
Okay, yes, all right. So I just wanted to bring to your attention something that the Chief Tatro brought to my attention regarding the chassis and cab for the new tanker. It showed up, I guess, at Four Guys, which is the company that's constructing the tanker. Was supposed to be there yesterday. There is an offer if we pre-buy the chassis for $267,750, which is part of the original quote for the entire truck. We would receive a credit of $7,233. Now that would title the cab and chassis in our name. However, it would stay, you know, at the factory for completion for the next 4 months until it's done. I have to tell you that I've had experiences with this type of a opportunity, and it didn't work out very well. In this particular case, you know, this was put out to bid and awarded as a COD. We would pay for it when it was delivered.
Right.
And so therefore, there's no performance bond for protecting the town in the event that something unfortunate happens to the company. And that could be a fire, that could be a financial thing, it could be any number of things, theft, IRS, you know, issues. But I have a personal professional experience that cost one of the towns I worked for a significant amount of money because the company that was building it did go under as the truck was under construction. So, so my recommendation is that even though we could save $7,233, I would say that it's not worth the risk of going ahead and laying out $268,000 for the cabin chassis prior to delivery.
Matt?
So my only question, and what you're saying makes perfect sense to me, but once we hold the title, wouldn't that be protected by Primex?
No, not necessarily. It's not so much the fact that we wouldn't get our truck. It may take 3 years to get it out of some court proceeding or some type of a bankruptcy or some type of a seizure. And as I said, my experience with the company, we were fortunate enough that we were given a heads up that something was going to happen, and we actually went down in the middle of the night and picked it up and took it. Incomplete, you know, and fortunately it was about 90% complete, but you know, typically, as you may be aware, if there's a seizure, they'll go down and they'll padlock the place, and it could be years before they release the assets and determine who owns them. So
True.
I'm just
Yeah.
not sure that they would cover us under those circumstances, to be
Right.
honest.
So if the place burnt down, we'd probably be good. If the business goes out of business, it's a different story. But
Oh, I might disagree with you on that. If it burnt down, it's not covered by their insurance because we own it.
but that's what I'm saying. But Primex would theoretically at that point cover it as
If we listed it with them, yes.
correct. I
Yeah.
mean, if we held the title, but I think the fact that if the business were to have something happen and the doors were locked, that's the bigger issue. So I personally don't think it's worth a $7,000 savings to put that much on the line.
Does that, how do other folks feel? Anybody interested in pursuing this?
No,
That doesn't sound.
the risk outweighs the saving.
Beth, go ahead.
Risk far outweighs the savings.
I don't think it's worth the savings. I mean, we already got an engine with parts in a box before. Let's not do
Yeah.
that again. Yeah.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly.
Mhm.
Okay, Walter, I appreciate you protecting our interests on that. And I mean, it's good that the chief brings these, to us. But in this case, just please explain the thought process, and I'm sure he'll understand.
Actually, after discussion with the chief, he concurred. He just
Oh.
wanted, we're just bringing it to the board's attention. So obviously you're the final say. But he agreed. He's familiar with those horror stories as well. And someday when we're able to have a staff picnic, I'll tell you the whole story about the one I was involved in. It takes quite a while. So.
Okay, sounds good.
And the only other thing I had, upcoming meeting schedules, regular board meetings, obviously tonight and the 23rd, April 13th and the 27th. And of course, we're still on track for our deliberative session on the 15th and voting day on June 8th.
Yeah.
One other item that came up just today has to do with a concern regarding the use of the community center. Was brought to my attention that a recent meeting was held by the Northwood Republican Committee that appeared to have more than the allowed number of participants in the building, and obviously, violating the policy that's been adopted by the board in the interim prior to our hopeful return to normalcy sometime in the near future. So, as we've done in the past, when this has been brought to the board's attention, notices have been sent to either the individuals or organizations that were responsible for not complying, letting them know that they were not in compliance, and that if they did not comply in the future, then that they would lose their privileges to use the facility until the restrictions are lifted. So I'm not sure if you had a chance to get the email that was forwarded to me, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention and see if you'd like to be consistent with our practice in the past for people non-complying to issue a letter of notice on this.
Yeah, I just just sent out just before the meeting, so not sure you got that either, but there was some pictures that show it's pretty well documented what you're supposed to do. I mean, it'd be kind of hard to miss the intent of what we're trying to do. I find it difficult to believe that somebody missed that. And we did, prior to giving out the new keys, make sure everybody knew the rules too. So I think it's a pretty clear case that they missed it on this one. And Walter, you said that previous situations like this, we always gave a warning first.
One other
We only,
incident that I've been involved, that was the way it was handled. Yes.
okay. How's the board want to handle it?
think we need to be consistent. So whereas in the last instance, we sent a warning letter that basically said, it's come to our attention, you violated the policy.
Yeah.
If you do it again, you're at risk of losing access to the building. I think that's what we need to do in this instance.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay. If not, Walter, do you need a motion or do you just need general consensus and nodding of heads?
General consensus is fine. It's the past practice at this.
Okay. Very good. So we're coming up on 7 o'clock. Do you want to prime us in terms of what comes next with this thing? And hopefully we don't have to read this whole darn thing either, but I guess that's up to you to tell us.
Well, let me just get to my notes here. I think what we're going to do basically is hold a public hearing, as we've talked about in the past. The intent here is to amend our license that the town issues to utility companies for allowing them to put in utility poles and conduits within the town's right of way. So, because the fact that those are now have been determined as taxable entities, no different than buildings and so on and so forth, that the town has the opportunity to assess real estate taxes on these fixtures, poles, conduits, etc. And so, in order to do that, it has to be stated in the license that we issue to the utility company. This has been a lawsuit that was settled quite a few years ago now, whereby the utility company said, listen, we had no idea we were going to be liable for this. You never told us when we got our license, and so therefore, we're not going to pay the taxes. And guess what? They won. So we've been unable to successfully collect taxes for those fixtures in the town right away up until hopefully this year. Again, this would become effective upon approval, and which means that it would be prior to April 1st of this year. So for the coming tax year, 21-22, we would be able to, with authority, assess those taxes to the utility companies that we have in town. So, so that's kind of the gist of it. It is a fairly succinct process that we're going to go through here, and so I did provide a guideline that should be adhered to as we go through.
Okay, yeah, I think in this case it's not real onerous. I'll read right through the whole thing, and Walter, if you need to chime in if I missed or didn't handle anything. So what I'm going to suggest is we take a 3-minute break so that we can start this promptly at 7, and then we'll do that. Pam, did you want to do something before the break?
Yes, I did before the break. Hal, as far as your read through, I'm not sure if you should read through the motion or whether the person making the motion.
Oh, good
So
point.
if you read through it and you read I, then it becomes your motion as opposed to one of the board members.
Okay.
So you might want to pause at the motion and allow someone to read that portion.
Sounds like we have.
Exactly, as opposed to you.
Sounds like we have a volunteer, Pam.
Well, I I know how to read.
Okay.
But yeah,
I'm gonna.
As a matter of some, yeah, as chairman, you should not be reading the motion.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, I'm gonna recess for 3 minutes because I need to step away for 2 minutes. Be right back.
I guess I'll just practice while he's gone. Beth, you look sunburned.
Do I? Oh, I have no makeup on. That's really me.
Oh, you look very red.
Yeah.
No, you look sunburned for sure.
No, I think it's the light. I have like those like Edison lights. You know what I mean? So like it makes that, yeah.
Ooh, fancy.
Oh, fancy. Hey, Chris, I have a question for you.
Answer.
Okay. Now that everyone's using the Bow Street exit to go to school, is there any way you could make that look less dangerous?
So I already talked to Pike Industries. They have a coal patch on hand that they're
Okay.
starting to pre-make now, getting ready for the pothole season.
Uh-huh.
So we have the sander out of the 1 ton right now. So probably towards the end of the week when we're done doing all the trees in town from the ice storms, we're going to be heading down, grabbing some coal patch and things like that, and doing the entrance, re-graveling it, things like that. So
Because when you're coming out of Bow Street, like to get into Route 4, by the gas station there,
Yep.
there's like this huge hole. It's like, is there a drain there? Because like I saw a car, literally the tire in front of me, it was like half on, half off.
yep.
I was a little scared for them.
So on both sides of the road where everybody cuts a corner, they've eroded the gravel that I put it. I talked to, I can't remember the lady's name from the school.
The principal?
No, the director there for the SAU. She's got a wicked Southern accent.
Oh, Monica Henson.
Monica.
Yes.
Monica, yep. So I talked to her and we went over everything, re-graveled the shoulders on the side, did some coal patch, things like that. But it's been so heavily used that all my gravel and stuff that I put in there is already gone.
Ooh.
It's like a cliff, really.
Yeah, it's really bad. And so as far as towards the end of the week, I got to re-gravel that, re-coal patch that. And there's a few other things I got to do there. So.
All right. I just noticed the car in front of me today and I was like, oh geez.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll tell you what, we're going to get started on this so we can keep moving along. So I'm going to state that we're having a poll licensing public hearing. And at this point, I'm going to open up the hearing. The purpose is to discuss amending all the existing utility pole licenses previously issued by the town of Northwood and create a new license, as existing licenses may not include language regarding taxation purposes pursuant to RSA 72:23, and it is in the best interest of the public to amend the pole licenses so they are consistent with the language in RSA 72:23 in order to remove possible questions as to the town's authority to assess the licensee's use of the town's right-of-way. I'm going to ask Walter to just briefly repeat what he had said just prior to us taking our recess so that the public can have their memory refreshed. And then we'll get into the meat of this. And then we'll
Chairman, before
Yes.
Walter does it, can we just have Paul confirm there's no one in the waiting room, seeing as it's a public hearing?
Yep, so I'm looking at it right now and there is nobody in the waiting room as of right now.
Thank you, Paul.
Good point. Thank you.
Good point.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, the purpose of this is in order to have a pole or a conduit in the town's right of way, the utility has to receive a license from the town. The town has been issuing licenses for many, many years, but it was determined within the past several years that the town was entitled to tax the poles and the conduits that are in the right of way because they are, like other structures and so forth, taxable. But because our existing licenses and our new or existing application does not specify that the utility will be responsible for paying property taxes, we have to amend our license and also amend all our existing licenses as mentioned to be in compliance with RSA 7223. And that's what we're doing tonight.
Okay, so thank you, Walter. Again, I don't see anybody waiting to comment, but I'll give folks another minute just in case. And Paul, again.
Have we received anything in writing?
Good question. Walter?
I was just about to say, we have not received anything in writing. I also wanted you to be aware that we have notified all the utilities that are located in the town of Northwood that we're aware of, and provided them by hand delivery notices of this public hearing, and that they were obviously given the opportunity to be, participating tonight, or submit written testimony, and we've received nothing to date. I just checked email and so forth, so.
Okay, that was a great question, Pam. Very good. Okay, I guess that's about the minute that I had said. So I am going to
Val, I
close.
think someone has their hand up.
Chris, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, just out of clarification, is that for new existing or is it for existing and new?
Oh,
Well, basically what it does is it amends our current license application. So that would mean for all the new ones that are put in. And it also amends all our existing licenses. So to answer your question, Chris, yes, it does cover both the existing polls as well as any new ones that are applied for.
Okay. Thank you.
sorry, I missed your hand there, Chris. I was toggling back and forth between screens. Anybody else want to speak or have questions? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, hold on, I got to close the public hearing.
Ah,
So I'll officially close it. And since I haven't heard any other comments, I'll open it up for motions by any board member. Pam.
I'll have one.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll move that all outstanding poll licenses issued by or under the authority of the Selectmen of Northwood or its predecessors in office, acting under the provisions of RSA 231:161 subsection B or its predecessor statutes, are hereby changed to incorporate in each such poll license as of March 10th, 2021, and effective as of such date, the following changes by inserting therein the following language. In accordance with the requirement of RSA 72:23(1)(b), this license is granted to the licensee subject to the condition that the licensee and any other entity using or occupying property of the municipality pursuant to this license shall be responsible for the payment of and shall pay all properly assessed real and personal property taxes at due date. Failure of the licensees to pay duly assessed personal and real property taxes when due shall be cause to terminate this license. In accordance with the requirements of RSA 72:23(1)(b), the licensees and any other entity using or occupying the property of the municipality pursuant to this license.
Oh, no. We lost her.
Yeah, she was getting a little fuzzy there. Well, I was having a little trouble hearing her there for a while, and then, geez, that was her big moment to shine too. Now, let's give her a minute and see if she comes back.
She's coming in now.
Yeah.
Stage fright.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pam, you're muted.
I am muted. Okay. Pursuant to this license, I put my finger on the screen so I knew where I was. Pursuant to this license, shall be responsible for the payment of and shall pay both current and potential real and personal property taxes when due. Furthermore, In accordance with the requirements of RSA 72:23(1)B, the licensees and any other entity using and/or occupying property of the municipality pursuant to this license shall be obligated to pay real and personal property taxes, typo, on structures or improvements added by the licensees or any other entity using or occupying the property of the licensor pursuant to this license.
Wow, that was quite a read there, Pam. Thank you. Would anybody like to second that? Okay, Matt, thank you very much. So is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, we'll do a
Yeah,
roll.
I actually was wondering if Eversource cut me out while I was reading.
Atlantic
I
broadband.
know what's going on here.
Well, let's have that conversation after we seal the vote. Okay, so Matt, how do you vote?
Yes.
Beth, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Pam?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And would anybody like to make any additional motions?
Hal, did you vote?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Pam. Yes, I voted in the affirmative also. So 4-0-0.
Yep.
Yeah, I lost
Glad to hear
track
that.
because I was looking at the next motion. Okay, would anybody?
I do have another motion.
Hey, hold on a second. Let me just read this. Okay, yeah. Does anybody have a second motion related to this? Pam, go ahead.
Second motion. I moved to adopt the new position for licensed utility poles and conduit form as presented.
Okay, great. Does
I'll second
anybody
that.
want to second that?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, and is there any discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Beth,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
and Hal is yes. Okay, so Walter, I believe we got through all that correctly.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions or concerns in terms of how we did it?
Perfect.
Great.
And Walter, would you fix those two typos, please?
Those are just the guidance. Those aren't in the documents. But I will.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so I guess we'll move on to old business if everybody's ready. And this has to do with the board rules, the position description, and the code of ethics. This is our second or third go-round on this. So Walter, how would you like to handle it? Just open it up for immediate questions and comments relative to what we got in our packs, or is there a different way you'd like to approach this?
I just wanted to mention regarding, first of all, the position description for the selectmen, that on page 1, I did make one other edit after I sent you the version that went in the packet, which had to do with the item of an ad hoc representative, which, as I thought about it, really doesn't make any sense to be an ad hoc representative. So I would suggest that we amend that to just read liaisons as may deemed necessary by the board, or whatever word we come up with that. But ad hoc representative really doesn't mean anything.
Which page was that on again, please?
Page 1 of the position description. About halfway down.
27 on the digital packet.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where I'm looking at. Okay, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
with
it's
you.
right at the beginning there. So you want it to be what? Just nothing?
Liaisons. Liaisons as may.
Liaison Liaison, okay, as may be deemed necessary. I got you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Well, should we go down through these one by one? So that's the position description. Anything else on the position description?
I got one thing. Are we statutorily required to have a selectman representative to the school board?
Okay, Matt, you're getting into something that I'm also interested in discussing. And so can we scroll down to the committees and stuff that are listed in the, what's it called? Bylaws.
Are we done with the position description? Or are you
Oh.
jumping ahead now?
Because the reason for my question is just having it listed where under section 2, under organization, because of the wording, the board shall by majority elect from its membership the following members: planning board, zoning, budget, school board, and then the liaisons. So I always get nervous with shall when I see something that we're not currently doing.
Yeah, I actually, that's, I guess, was sort of the gist of my questions too. Is zoning a shall also? I didn't think zoning was.
It's not an ex officio position.
Not voting.
Zoning is ex officio?
It's not. I said.
So it's crossed out, right?
Yeah, I see that.
So school board would not be ex officio also.
It's
That's
not
correct.
listed as ex officio. Does, you know, I guess this goes back to Matt's question. Matt, did we not have a discussion where we said we were going to put the 2 required ones in and then have an organizational day for all the others? Or am I mixing that up?
My preference in terms of, this listing under organization,
Yes.
I'd like to see it say the board shall by majority, blah, 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 planning board, budget committee, and then liaisons or members to any other board as deemed necessary by the board. So
Wait, you
again,
said,
like the less we have to revisit this document, the better. So if it makes sense, if the school board says, hey, we'd love to have a BOS representative, awesome, right? But until that happens, I just don't want to get hung up having it here on a piece of paper that basically says we're supposed to have that position filled when
right.
we don't. So I think if we leave ourselves some leeway, that would, we're better off.
Okay, so, but what are the 2 that you said we would keep? Planning board and budget committee?
Correct.
Okay, I thought you said zoning. Okay,
No, planning and budget.
planning and budget, the rest of them are all by organization / request.
Okay,
That's
got it.
That's sort of the way I remembered the original discussion going, and that's why I wanted to talk about it too. And I see Beth's nodding. How do you feel, Pam?
I'm way down in the bylaws section
Oh,
where we've listed everything on Earth. So I'm good with what Matt just said. Budget committee and planning board is ex officio members,
right.
and liaison representatives to other boards as deemed necessary. And then you're going to have to go over to that bylaw section.
Right. And then do we need to
You're going to change yada 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 to liaison representatives as needed.
So we'll change. I think we're general consensus to change it to that approach that Matt suggested in both places, basically. Is that correct? Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. I really like that idea when you brought it up earlier. And so it sounds like we have consensus on that. So Walter, I think that's from the discussion so far, the main thing that we need to address. Pam?
Well, would we put in that, oh, I guess it does. It says the chair shall request from members their choice of committees. Would the chair have the authority to establish or define which committees he would like to see representatives go to?
I think that's more of a, I think that would be more of a board decision with guidance from the town administrator. Because my sense is, and this is just my sense, you know, people will come to either the chair or to the town administrator and saying, hey, you know, we really could use somebody from the select board to sit with us. And then when we have our organizational meeting, in group, we would decide that. And, you know, in group, we may say, well, they're asking for somebody, maybe we better send somebody. Or in group, we may say, maybe that's not such a good idea to send somebody. And I'm just sort of interpreting, giving you my interpretation of how I viewed what Matt was saying. There's two that are required by statute. We're listing them. And then all the rest are on organization day, we decide which ones they are and who's going to do them. Is that the essence of what you're saying, Matt?
You got it. And then, you know, if someone's not doing their job, if they're not showing up to committee meetings or whatever, then, you know, I think the chair could appoint a backup, right?
Yeah, or we can, as a board,
committee assignment per se. It's just saying,
yeah.
Would anybody else like to go to this meeting so that we can get some work done?
Yeah. Okay, but that addresses your concern about the shalls and stuff, correct, Matt?
It does, yep.
Okay, Beth, you want to weigh in?
Well, I know at the beginning we did assign committees, then we did have, like, you know, someone, you know, a substitute that could go to the committee.
Right.
So I
Yeah,
think
that's
we
right.
definitely did that. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. I remember the spreadsheet. You're right about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so, you know, I think what really Matt is saying is then we just have that spreadsheet with the proposed ones that we all agree on, and then we just, you know, at that organizational meetings, sort out who does what. And I kind of like the idea that we're not casting it in stone, other than the ones that are by statute. Okay, I think that's a good suggestion. So what about any other points? Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to bring up? Okay, if not, then I'm just going to maybe state the obvious, but some of these require all five of us to sign, so I assume you'll adjust the signature page too when it comes time to do that. So then, Walter, based on our discussion and stuff, I assume we can wrap this up for next meeting, and then do we vote on it, or how does that work?
Yes, we vote on it.
Okay. Okay, well, so before we wrap it up, any final calls, a final call for any edits or questions? Okay, if not, appreciate the discussion on that. I thought it was good. Okay, so Walter, do you want to fill us in on how you want us to move forward on the building permit fees? I will say I appreciated the analysis you did, showing how much revenue we got versus what you think our costs are. And, you know, based on that, it looks like we're covering approximately 40 of the $50,000 that is costing us in round numbers. And that's been fairly consistent between the 2 years that Walter analyzed. So I guess if there's other questions or comments in terms of what Walter presented to us, or any questions about the fees themselves, let's open it up now.
Let me just say a couple of things. You know, first of all, this is a fairly broad brush in terms of the cost. I'm sure it's higher because it doesn't include all the accessories that go into it, whether,
Right.
you know, pens and papers and all that good stuff, portion of the photocopier, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't include any time that I spend in this particular effort, as well as, you know, the whole collection piece and that type of thing. So it's probably, you know, another $5,000 more for miscellaneous cost. The other purpose of redoing the fees and the fee structure is, you know, kind of redistributing the equity amongst the different permits that are issued, so that they're being based on value of the project versus flat fee and square footage, that there's a more equitable cost being distributed to the different people that apply for permits, basically. So that's one of the other pieces of the puzzle to consider when evaluating this.
Yeah, actually, Walter, I did want to ask you about that, because your analysis did show that if the fees are based on the project dollars, we could end up with more variability in terms of revenue. If you look at 2019 versus 2020, you know, good year versus bad year, if you assume the fees are, quote, proportional to the amount of improvements that, you know, ask for a permit, yeah, we'll see more ups and downs. Personally, I'm willing to live with that variance, given just what you said, that the fees will be more proportional to what you're actually spending. And I think we can absorb that variability, whereas the users have less capability to absorb that. And so I'm okay with that, but I think we need to recognize that that's going to happen. Okay, so Walter, what would be our next step on this?
So the next thing would be to schedule a public hearing to get public input on the proposed change. See what the public has to say about it, and then you know, make a final decision sometime in the future, and then determine an effective date.
Okay, there's no hard deadline on this like it was with the poll tax, where we wanted to get it in before the, yeah.
No, I think this would be something that, you know, if we targeted perhaps an effective date of July 1st, September 1st, something like that, that would give us plenty of time to, you know, go through the public hearing process, and then make notification, you know, to people as far as the change of the fees and that type of thing. And it's if we should be able to do that by July 1st, if we wanted to pick that as the effective date.
How does the board feel about that target date? General consensus on that?
I personally prefer something, I mean, if we're willing to go out to September, just purely out of consideration for people who've already started development projects, based off a certain set of numbers. You know, if I take a plan to the bank on a development and all of a sudden my fees are going to increase by several $1,000, I want to be able to know that's not going to jeopardize my funding or something like that. So
yeah, so have the public,
maybe that's not going to be a problem, but I prefer to push it to the fall.
well, if we do that, you know, we can still have the public hearing with the idea that we then pull the trigger later, and then that would put people on notice. Hey, this is coming.
Totally fine with me. I'm happy to do the hearing anytime. I think an effective date of a little further down the road would be fair.
How do others feel about that? I saw Beth, you nodded a little bit.
No, that makes sense. That way, I mean, it could be going up by a few $1,000s, and I wouldn't want someone to, you know.
Right.
Good idea, Matt.
Okay, so Walter, sounds like we're looking at getting the hearing done as soon as we can. You know, obviously you've got your priorities, but let's do it sooner rather than later. And then during that approval process, can we specify the effective date?
Absolutely.
Okay, then Matt, I think we can deal with your issue there.
Thank you.
Yeah, it'd be great. Okay, anything else on this? So if not, then the next thing is the formal public hearing.
Yes.
Okay, So now we're moving on to new business. And up for discussion is Walter's plan for the five-year plan for our fund balance. And as I preemptively said, maybe incorrectly termed, this is something I've been looking forward for a while. And Walter's done this successfully for other towns where he's helped balance this and smooth out the tax flow, the tax rate and stuff. And he's given us our first pass at his suggestions for what he can do for Northwood. So Walter, do you want to walk us through that?
Sure. Yep. So you have a spreadsheet that I provided that starts with 2020 because that's the year that we know the actuals from. So that's a concrete departure point. So the estimated appropriation column actually is for 21 going forward. But in 2020, it was, again, the way that the state recommends that you calculate your fund balance policy is to use the total expenditures for the school, the town, and the county. And in Northwood, the current policy is 6% of those expenditures. And those expenditures totaled in 2020, $13,960,647, which basically amounts to a policy of fund balance of $837,632, which is the third column over. The column in between, where it says $2,522,060, is the current fund balance as of December 31 of 2020. So that number was just determined by our audit, and so that's you can see obviously that we're in excess of the policy to about the tune of about 7%. That 2,522 is over 13% of the cumulative appropriations. And so if you simply deduct what we have versus what the policy is, it leaves a balance of 1.684 million as excess fund balance. Now this year, depending on what the final outcome is of town meeting, we originally had proposed to use about $185,000 of fund balance. And then there's been subsequent discussions about perhaps amending the article for the land purchase of or the land fund for the public safety building to come out of fund balance as well, so there would be no tax impact, which would increase it by $295,000 to a total of $477,000. So we would, again, if successful in making the amendments and then successful in approving the articles, we could use up to $477,000 for the 2021 town meeting. And that would, by doing that, that would, basically give us a drawdown of the $477,000. Again, that's going to be subject to changes that are going to have to take place with the warrant articles and so forth. So if that all happens, then going into 2021, if you look at the next line down, I've estimated that the appropriations are going to increase by 5%. That's just a wag on my part. It's just a guess. It could be a little higher, it could be a little lower, but again, you're talking town, county, and school district together. So I picked 5% just as a number to work with. This is a fluid document, so if the actuals, obviously, as they change, we'll plug in the actuals and recalculate whatever the balance is from that point going forward. So if we're able to utilize the 477,000, then we'll go into 2021 tax rate season with a balance in our fund balance of $2,045,061. Again, with the increase in the appropriations, then the policy amount is going to increase as well, because that's what it's based on. So that's why you see the 879, 520 versus the 837. That's fluid as well, because it's a calculation of a percentage. It's not a fixed number. And again, that would create a delta of 1.165 million. And then if we decided that we would want to look at a 5-year schedule and pretty much smooth the use of the fund balance, at least for the next 3 years, for 21 through 24, $300,000 to $350,000 per year. That would help offset, just for an example, the proposed, road investment, so we would be able to go and stay on task with our road improvements without having a tax impact, for that 4-year period, utilizing that amount of money. Or it can be used for whatever, obviously, the board decides going forward when the budget's prepared. But that would give us, a smooth and consistent utilization of that fund balance. Now, of course, as we go along, the fund balance starts to dwindle because we're utilizing it. We're getting it down to policy level. The other thing I factored into on the far right column was that it's more likely than not that we're going to have some quote unquote, as I use the term, retained earnings as a result of either excess revenue that we hadn't anticipated or under expenditures for whatever various reasons over the course of a $4 million budget. It's probably likely that you'll have about 150 or perhaps $100,000 unexpended. So that would actually backfill into the fund balance each year. So the impact wouldn't be the pure 350, it would be, say, $200,000 reduction on a net basis. So am I losing anybody, or is everybody fairly clear on what I'm talking about here?
Yeah, Walter, the only question I had was, did you factor in the retained earnings each time around from line to line, or is that just an added point that you were making there?
It's factored in.
It is factored in. Okay, so when we look at the numbers, the ending balance includes all those things that you factored in, both the amount to be used and the offset from estimated retained earnings.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So like in a year like we had last year, where we really managed the budget hard, I guess I'd say, where we had close to $450,000, $500,000 retained. If we're able to do that again, that's even so much the better then, correct?
Certainly it is. That certainly wouldn't be my goal. My goal would be to target a more precise budget. But you can't control. There's a lot of uncontrollable items in the budget. Which is obviously we saw this year with the vacancies in personnel and that type of thing. Those can add up really quickly.
Yeah, well, yeah, don't misinterpret. What I'm saying is it's all for the better. I meant in terms of it's better in terms of our fund balance. No, I agree with you 100%. If we budgeted to do certain things, we're promising the town folks that we're going to do it, and they're expecting it to get done. And if we, under expend and therefore don't get stuff done, shame on us. So no, I understand your goal to make sure we're down in that 150 or whatever range, just so we have a little cushion. But otherwise, yeah, we need to make sure we do everything we promised.
Right.
But I guess I'd have to also say, I kind of like that your first year drawdown is approximately what we essentially returned last year. I like that sort of symmetry there.
Yeah. So as we go through, years, 2024 through 2026, basically is when we have pretty much reached our policy level in our fund balance. Then, we're in a position where we're going to be, going back to relying strictly on the tax rate at that point. But at least this gives us a plan. This obviously gives us an opportunity to do the smoothing that I think is appropriate for a tax rate, versus, taking big chunks at one time and then exhausting it over a short-term period. And next thing you know, everything else is on the tax rate. You've got a spike that's going to be significant. So.
Matt?
So I understand the idea of using some of the unrestricted fund balance to pay for, say, a year's road work, right? But do we have the option to simply buy down the tax rate in any given year with unrestricted fund balance?
Well, you do. Effectively, that's what you're doing by.
That's the same thing at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's how you utilize it. But yeah, exactly. You either apply it in the warrant article for the appropriation, or you apply it at the time of the tax rate setting.
And that's my only thought on that, is that one requires a public vote and the other is a little cleaner, isn't it? In terms of, if we can we buy down tax rate without that going to the voters?
Yes.
I don't think anybody would be mad about that.
Well,
They would if we don't get the roads done.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I understand that. But I mean, what I'm saying is, if we're comparing apples to apples, what I don't want us to do is invent projects to spend down unrestricted fund balance when we could be simply buying out tax.
I think it's been determined, at least by the previous road plan, and probably will be confirmed by the coming road plan, that $350,000 to $500,000 a year is what's needed for maintaining the roads on an annual basis, via preventative maintenance or reconstruction. So I think that's an expense that's going to be there, probably forever, and will continue to go up. So I think that's something that you can kind of target, and obviously value at the highest value for utilizing the fund balance, so that it has the highest opportunity for passage, because it won't have.
Bake that. So next year, bake that $350,000 into the budget when we're talking about road maintenance.
Well,
and then budget what we would need on above that 350.
Well, Matt, no, I think you're conflicting these things. The one option would be to do it just like we're doing it on the some of those things this year, and that would be have a warrant for $350,000 for road work, which is funded out of this, meaning no tax impact. The flip side would be what you were talking about: put the 350 into the budget, and then buy the tax rate down by 350. And from my perspective, putting an additional 350 in the budget and then trying to buy the tax rate down by the equivalent amount is like not a good chance.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just trying to figure out, again, my biggest concern, if we were going to do something like, say, we're dedicated to using unrestricted funds for road maintenance, I'm all for it. What I don't want to be doing is inventing projects. So that's my only concern. And like you guys are correct. There's plenty that needs to be done. I just think we need to be really clear in terms of how we're going to approach it.
Well, and we're going to have to get approval of the townsfolk either way. And I've expressed my concerns about being able to get the road work done and then digging ourselves into deeper holes. So this is certainly up for discussion. This is not, etched in stone, but Walter's just trying to give us some ideas here.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I am very much in favor of this. Yeah. If I'm sounding like I'm questioning, it's just because I want to make sure that we're doing what's best for everyone.
Well, and I think we need to have that discussion as to what is the best approach. Like you said, maybe some of these, maybe just buy down the tax rates. One thing we could do on our own. The other side of that, or the double edge of that sword, is that we're sort of cutting the people out of the process. Whereas if we say, hey, we've already collected some of your money, now we'd like to get your approval as to how we're going to spend it. especially on something that's, like the roads where it's $350,000. I do see a benefit to that, but you're right. We could have, like last year, well, I wouldn't have done it last year because I didn't want to do anything given COVID. Who knows what was going to happen? But now that we have a much better sense and things seem to be turning around a little bit, I'm anxious to do something, quite frankly. And I guess the other thing that I'm thinking about in favor of at least doing something like this, managing the tax rate a little bit more closely than we have in the past, is I think if you take advantage of the money that we have now, start doing some of these things and start smoothing some things out, that gives us a few more years to look at the CIP, really get that nailed down solid, and also think about maybe some of those projects that are on there. So to your point, Matt, we wouldn't necessarily have to do the roads. We could look to the CIP and say, hey, we got a big purchase coming up here. Let's use it for that. And what I'm really hoping is that in 5, 6, 7 years, after we've done this for a while, we really get to steady state where people don't see these blips like, we've had. And we'll still have the revenue to deal with, which is always variable. And this sort of bit us in the butt this past time around. I think it's at least a step in the right direction in terms of looking out more than 1 year. Let's put it that way. So, Walter, what's your sense as to how we handle this? I mean, obviously, we have some of your recommendations here for the first year. It does require an amendment on the safety complex land, correct?
Yes.
So that would be a motion to amend that somebody would have to make, and that could come from the select board?
Oh, sure. Any registered voter.
Okay. So just to be clear, when he's, we already have in the warrants $150,000, just to talk about the big numbers, $150,000 for the roads that would come out of this. That's already written in the warrants as is. The land for the safety complex is not written that way. We would have to amend that if we were going to follow this plan. And then, Walter, there's 8,000. We talked about that earlier, the 8,000 for the bicentennial or 250th anniversary celebration. What was the other one, Walter?
Oh, I forgot to look it up. There is one other thing that you had agreed to take out of fund balance, but I can't tell you what it is right off the top of my head, to be honest. I have to look at the warrant.
Okay, well, maybe what we could do is document that list so everybody's clear and let this digest a little bit. I think this was a good start and a good initial discussion. Beth, did you want to add something?
I just have a question. I know for the first 26 minutes, I was kicked out of Zoom like a dozen times, which is why I'm on my phone now. So I think I missed the whole putting the land for the safety complex in the big warrant. My only fear is if it's default, then we've lost that again.
It's not going in the budget. It would be, we take the warrant article that we have now for the land, and instead of it being funded via the taxpayers and having a tax impact, we would fund it using the fund balance.
From 2020 or 2021?
No, the big number that Walter keeps talking about in this spreadsheet. We have, so if you look,
2020 then.
Yeah, so if you look at 2020, working your way across that spreadsheet line, Beth, when you come to the estimated amount to be used for this year, 2020, Walter is saying 477.
Okay, all right, I get it now. Thank you.
Yeah, and
I
so,
appreciate it. All right.
yeah, so that, yeah. And, that's that's the suggestion. It's not a requirement. It's, he's just giving us examples of how we could play this.
Yep.
Excuse me, Pam? You're muted. There you go.
Well, so estimated out of the 477, 150 for road funds,
Yeah,
8,400 for 250th, and then how much would you be estimating for public safety land?
Well, what's in the warrant right now is 295.
295.
And just to make the point on this, it's 295 to be raised by taxes. And we would have to amend it on the floor to say raised or funded through the fund balance.
2020 fund balance, would you have to specify that?
It's already in there.
Yeah,
It's already in there?
yeah. And like I said, Walter, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just looked up what the other item was, and it's the money from the computer finance software that was put into the fund balance from the reimbursement from
Right.
Pro Fund. That's 23,600. That's the other item that's coming out of the fund balance.
Yeah. So I mean, just to that point, that money's in there, and we had already had some discussions saying, let's get it into the fund balance so that when we start thinking about software, and in Cheryl's report, you saw she's looking at new software to finally get us back into modern times, and that might be an item to put in a warrant and pull from the fund balance. Just as an example. I guess what I'm going to suggest for the board is we talked about this with some specific examples, just so maybe it helps explain what we're trying to do. I'm going to ask that, Walter, we have it documented. Let's just think about this and let it gel, because this is the first pass, and it doesn't say we have to even follow this. I mean, Matt, to your point, we could buy the tax rate down by $1.5 million and be heroes. Now, I prefer to do that when I'm up for re-election, tell you the truth, but.
Thanks, Al.
But I think in the best interest of the town, as Walter said, you start those swings and all of a sudden you can't get out of it. You're bouncing back and forth. You could really zing people. So Walter, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to summarize by saying, for the board's benefit, that the important thing here is that there has been discussion and there is a general plan that's mutually agreeable amongst the board members, because when the taxpayer asks that question about why are you retaining all of our tax dollars, why aren't you giving it all back to us? Well, it's because we have a plan, and the plan is designed to help smooth the impact of future expenses, over at least the next 5 years. This is going to be a fluid document. It's going to change how it gets utilized from year to year. There could be a whole new board in 4 years or 5 years, and they may have a completely different concept about how to use it. But I think it's important that the board has a general plan or a general understanding about what the use is going to be and how that we're going to get the town back into compliance with the policy. That's the key thing. The numbers and how and the details, I think, are going to be decided on a year-by-year basis. But this is just an example. And next year, when we get the fund balance, we relook at it, we rework the numbers, and we may be in a different, totally different situation, next year, and it may have to be totally reworked. That's really the purpose, of a plan like this. Is it's a planning, it's a tool, so that you can answer honestly to the taxpayers about, what are you going to do with this?
Yeah. Well, I think you made an excellent point. Year to year, we're going to reevaluate. So maybe the emphasis on our thinking, Walter, should be more, how do we feel about the amount that you're recommending this year at 477,000 and those particular projects, and in particular, the idea of the safety complex land coming out of this fund as opposed to being raised by taxes. So I'll open it up for final comments and then we'll move on. Okay, well, Walter, again, this was something I was looking forward to. I personally really appreciate you doing this, so thank you.
Those numbers are really helpful, Walter.
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody have any committee reports that they'd like to share with us? Beth, go ahead.
Saturday morning, Tim and I met with Gary Tasker to go through, oh my Lanta, like 10 gigantic scrapbooks full of pictures. He has so much memorabilia. It's like he could be our historical society. He really, so we tagged, I want to say 14 or 15 to possibly see if we can make them into like picture size. A lot of them are very small photos, so we don't want to blow up too big and then have it be really distorted. There was one of Route 4 when literally it was being built, and it's so incredible over by where like Louis Pizza is, kind of in that area right there.
Yeah.
And just the old shoe mill and a bunch of different ones. And then he had a great idea to, as a fundraiser, I'm going to bring it to the 250 committee, about doing like a photo album book.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. I was with it for 3 hours, trust me. So
wow.
that would be really cool. We picked probably 100 pictures. We're going to narrow it down, obviously, and see what quality they are. But do, a binded album with, different sections of town. And so that should be a good little fundraiser,
That
for
would be
fireworks.
great. That's really unique too.
Yeah.
I saw
And
one.
then he also had wooden coins.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I think Tim was going to look into that. And then we found it's probably like maybe 18 inches by maybe 30 inches. Tim took a picture of it. I'll send it all to you guys. It's like an old poster. It had like, I think it was Co-Brown's baseball, like team in the middle.
Yeah.
But we thought if we could do the middle part with like all the town information, and there's 10 businesses out of the 30, there's still part of Northwood. So maybe we could get them to sponsor to make a new poster, and then it was really cool. So
okay, well,
it was a very, very fun Saturday morning.
yeah, sounds like it. So
Yeah.
you'll discuss some of this with the 250th committee and stuff too?
Yep.
Terrific.
I mean, our goal really was just the pictures for town hall, and he's like, he'd like to do that, and he was willing to do most of the work. So that was really nice of Gary. So definitely.
Yeah. Wow, that is terrific. That's terrific. Okay, well, good. That is really encouraging. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Anybody else want to raise anything? Okay. If not, I'll open it up for citizens forum
Could we do one thing before you go?
before we go.
Well, before you go to citizens forum, and you have a very nice letter from the Epsom Board of Selectmen that I think is worthy for the town. I'll go ahead and read it if you wouldn't
Yes.
mind.
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, this is from the town of Epsom, and directed to the Northwood Select Board. The Board of Selectmen from the town of Epsom would like to recognize your fire and rescue personnel for their service to our community during the recent tragedy in our town. It is greatly appreciated by all of us, and we are grateful for their assistance. We realize the sacrifice that first responders make daily and the difficult circumstances that they must deal with often. We thank you for your willingness to assist our town during this sad time. The support of our fire and rescue received from your town has aided our personnel to begin to cope with this tragic event. Thank you. And it's from Virginia Drew, which is chair of the Epsom Select Board, Cheryl Gilpatrick, vice chair of the Epsom Select Board, and Hugh Curley, the third selectman, Epsom Select Board. So if we can pass along to the fire and rescue for just a commendable and how much it's appreciated, especially when we receive a letter like this.
Yeah, from the outside, that's good. Thank you for raising that. Thank you. That was great. So anything else that we want to discuss before we go into final request for citizens input? Okay, if not, then I'll open it up for citizens forum. If anybody wants to speak. Paul, is there anybody in the waiting room?
There's not anyone in the waiting room at this time.
Okay, and I don't see anybody on the screen, so we'll close off citizens forum. Walter, I know that we need to do a non-public if it's just to do the minutes. Is there any other points that we need, or what any other basis that we need to go into non-public for?
Yes, one item under section C.
Okay, so let's work out the logistics. Who's going to take over control of the meeting? Do we need Paul in there or anybody else in there besides the select board?
No, no one else.
Okay.
Matt can do it.
Matt, you want to take over?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. So at this point, I'm looking for a motion to go into non-public under 91 C.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Beth. Okay. Roll call vote. Pam,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
and Hal is yes. Okay, so Paul, you're going to pass off to Matt, and I think you can head out. Well, head out, I guess is you're done for the evening, I guess at that point. So